Hello everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we'll be doing a box office breakdown for this past weekend. Now, a little caveat, this is Memorial Day weekend, so I want to first off saying thank you to every single man and woman who has ever served this country, especially those who have lost their lives and given their lives for the United States. And so I want to offer prayers and thanksgiving to them and to their families on this Memorial Day. But it is also a full weekend, meaning that some of these box office numbers are not going to be complete until the day is through. So we'll get some updates tomorrow for the full, multiple day, Memorial Day weekend numbers in general. But we actually do have some numbers coming in that are looking pretty darn good for A Quiet Place Part 2. And not so good for Cruella, a live-action adaptation of 101 Dalmatians, focusing on Cruella and giving her a backstory that, from what I hear, is laughably bad, that no one, of course, asked for, and we'll, of course, also update on some of the other films that have already been in release as such. But before we go any further, please be sure to smash the like button and light up that fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey. It really does mean a lot. And also, starting this week, in fact, starting today, we'll be having a stream over on Odyssey for the Good Morning Asgard podcast. This is something that I did last summer. As some of you may know, I am a teacher, and so having summers off means I have a little bit more time. And so if you want more information about that, go check out the website, ombreviews.com. You'll find a link not only to this event, but you'll also be able to find my entire streaming schedule. So looking at the box office weekend breakdown, A Quiet Place Part 2 in its first weekend came in at number 1 with a whopping $48.3 million, coming in at over 3,000 theaters. This is very impressive. I think this is something that not a lot of people in the industry were expecting. I know that a lot of the expectations were a little bit lowered because of previous weekends of them expecting and thinking that other films would have done really well. Spiral, for instance, which came out a few weeks ago, there were a lot of experts saying, oh, we think this film is going to do twice the amount of money that it's going to make, and it ended up just not doing it, and has since not really been able to keep up with itself based on the numbers that we have as far as the possibility of profitability. And for a film that cost only $20 million to make, that's not looking very good for the box office. But what it is what A Quiet Place Part 2 is doing. Now, I have not been able to see it yet, but I love the first Quiet Place, and I cannot wait to see A Quiet Place Part 2. But as you all know, if you have children, it becomes a little bit more complicated to find time for these types of things, especially when there are certain companies and certain places that are still talking about masks and having to be vaccinated in order to go into a place. Again, all that nonsense also adds up to it as well. Coming in at number 2, though, was Walt Disney's Cruella, which came in with $21.3 million, which is not the worst number that I've ever seen in the world. And remember that this is not including how many people, and honestly, I question anyone who does, but the people who spent $30 on the Disney Premier access of Cruella, allowing them to watch from the safety of their homes with their children. And I suppose if you have a large family, paying $30 for the film might make sense. But the question asked is, who is this film made for? It doesn't seem to be made for people who grew up during this time. It doesn't seem to be made for people in the 90s era either, because it seems to be taking a lot of creative freedom, and it seems to be making the story into something that is just downright stupid. And it just, again, raises the question as to why. But of course, it's because Disney thinks that they can make money by putting out cheap remakes that people don't have to think, there's not a lot of thought put into this story, and no one cares about stories anymore anyway. They love these films by committee. Marvel has been a great example of that, but I think people are starting to wake up, and obviously the pandemic also had an influence on it as well. Coming in at number 3 is Spiral, which made another $2.2 million. Not the worst drop-off in a third weekend. Wrath of Man came in with $2.1 million, so still making some money, though I do actually finally have a production budget on that film, which actually paints a little bit of a darker picture for it. And then the other Disney film, Raya and the Last Dragon, came in at number 5. And so diving into some of these numbers, A Quiet Place Part 2, it is interesting because there are some foreign numbers that have come in. For some reason, the numbers, which is the site I prefer to use because Box Office Mojo once it got acquired by IMDb, really just kind of went downhill. A lot of the features and the look that used to be really awesome and easy to find information became very convoluted, and some of that information became protected behind a paywall by IMDb Pro. And so I've just decided to use the numbers, and sometimes they fall a little bit behind as far as updating information. So there is actually more to be said here, and we'll get to it when we get to the actual charting, as I like to do towards the end of these videos. But A Quiet Place Part 2, solid $48.3 million domestically, a very strong start. You then have Cruella, which came in with $21.3 million in the domestic marketplace, making $16.1 million in the international marketplace. I would imagine that most of that money came from China. As we all know, Disney is very good friends with China, and that should make you immediately always remind yourselves of the Uyghur concentration camps in China and Disney's relationship with China and the CCP, and also thanking paramilitary group at the end of their film Mulan, and that we should therefore always question any of the decisions and any of the products that are made by Disney and how they try and placate to the Communist Party. That is your message of the day, or your reminder of the day, about how now Disney is indeed an evil corporation, as many corporations these days tend to be. Spiral coming in now with $26.5 million worldwide, which again seems like it would be fine if the film was a $5 or $10 million movie, but at $20 million, and at the fact they only get about 60% of the box office when everything is said and done, this is not nearly as good as it should be for this kind of a movie. It also shows how the Saw franchise has fallen tremendously from the eyes of fans. I remember when a Saw movie was almost guaranteed to make massive profits, which is why they made so many of them. But in the process, similar to what we saw with Transformers, when you make too much of a product, you start to kind of muddy the waters. You start to water down the product to the point where the hardcore fans start to say, yeah, you know what, this isn't really my thing anymore, and it's very clearly a cash grab, and yeah, just no thank you. And so I myself had initially had some interest in Spiral, but after what I've heard about it, I, again, could easily just wait for it to pop up on streaming at some point in the future and just leave it at that. And then the last film I'll talk about is Wrath of Man. As I said, I did find a production budget for this movie. $66.6 million. Again, pretty respectable. This is a Guy Ritchie film that I also really want to see. It stars Jason Statham. And the production budget, though, does make this movie not look nearly as impressive as it once did, when I assumed that the production budget was actually a lot less than what it was before. But it does actually fall within the range of what I had predicted prior to that. All right, so let's go ahead and get into some box office charting. Before I do, this is the new OMBReviews.com. Not a whole lot really has changed, except now I actually have an official domain, so yay me for finally being able to follow through with that. But this will have all of the same stuff that you've been looking for. You have the stream schedule. This has been updated for the summer. So the big difference there is Mondays and Wednesdays, the Good Morning Asgard podcast will be exclusive over on Odyssey. And I'm hoping to be able to keep this a static link. So this link should always bring you to the live show, because I think I can do that over on that platform. If not, then I will update the link here, but you will have access to it as such. There's also a actual dedicated page to it where it just brings you to the actual podcast page itself and the actual Odyssey page itself. And also on the right-hand side here, as you can see, all of the Welcome to Asgard podcasts, this is the main show that I do Tuesdays and Thursdays, will auto-populate once the podcast episode is available live. But you also still have box office tracking available. And so let's go ahead and make this page a little bit bigger so that way people can see. Well, I thought that would help things out, but apparently this box doesn't want to get any bigger, but we'll go ahead and just leave it at that. I don't know how I did that, but makes me happy. So as you can see, A Quiet Place Part 2, actually, when you take into account, so these updated numbers, there we go, these updated numbers as far as the worldwide totals are concerned, I got from Box Office Mojo, because I kind of had to because of them falling behind. So A Quiet Place Part 2 actually made $80.5 million, and I'm sorry that it's acting weird like this. I don't know why. Cruella made $42.6 million worldwide as well. So as you can see, A Quiet Place Part 2, which cost significantly less than Cruella, made twice as much. In fact, when you look at the production budget, A Quiet Place Part 2 only cost $17 million. With marketing, that's $25.5 million versus Cruella, which again, remember, Cruella made half of what Quiet Place Part 2 made, cost $100 million to produce, and $150 million with the actual marketing budget. That should make anyone at Disney realize, maybe we're the problem. But as we all know, they rarely ever see the error of their own ways. But with that being said, at $80.5 million, A Quiet Place Part 2 is already, after one weekend, profitable. Not only has it broken even, it has made already massive profit. Now, I will say, just like I've said with previous films, that as far as the international money that it's made, that a lot of that indeed has come from China. So it also got a China release over there. And so a lot of that foreign total is China money. However, even without the international marketplace, like this is what is really impressive, and the most impressive about A Quiet Place Part 2 is that even without that foreign total, so if it was just the $48.3 million that it made domestically, that already has it at positive $3 million. So even just based on how well it did domestically, and remember, Memorial Day weekend is still not done as far as the box office is concerned, you're looking at a movie that in one weekend has already made back its money, which is another reason why Hollywood really needs to start looking more into these lower budget movies, these lower budget indie level films, whatever it is that you want to call them, and just focus on the story. The less money you put into a project means the more frugal you have to be with that money. It means you have to actually make certain decisions with that money and say, okay, where should our focus be? Should our focus be on getting a crack writing team? Should our focus be on trying to get actors who may not be the biggest names in the world, but actually are going to be able to produce brilliant results? Are we going to allow directors, like in this case, John Krasinski, to have a vision and follow through with that vision? These are the questions that studios need to start taking into account, because when you have these massive films, and every massive movie so far that Disney has put out for the past year and a half have all come out negative. All of them, every single one of them, even ones that I've liked like Soul, every single one of them has had massive financial loss based on the box office numbers. Now, again, one could argue that they're making the money up elsewhere. One could argue that we don't really know how much money they're making from Disney Plus, and so therefore that could be a factor. But because they don't officially release those numbers in any kind of way that we could put into a chart and break down and actually be able to utilize in any way, in any capacity, it leaves us with only the numbers that are in front of us. It leaves us only with the public information that's in front of us. And according to the public information that we have in front of us, Disney is in a massive, disastrous spiral when it comes to their box office performance. And this is why, as I said in a previous video, to me, when it comes to Disney and when it comes to the future of big budget films, I think the linchpin is going to be Black Widow. Because if by July, a Disney film like Black Widow, not just a Disney, but a Marvel film in Black Widow, if a movie like that can't make profit, if a movie like that underperforms, if a movie like that can only perform well in markets like China, if it's even allowed to be released in China by that point, because remember, there's now tensions going on between the two, though I honestly think that they'll work it out because Disney's going to do whatever it has to in order to get that China money, even though it's really not all that much when everything is said and done. It means that Disney is going to be in a position where it's going to have to explain to a lot of investors why it is that they're pouring hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars into these massive by committee projects that now a lot of people are just rejecting. I mean, going even back to some of the other earlier Marvel films, yeah, you could say that they made a lot of money, but you could also see that they were losing fans with almost every single one of those films. As many people as they brought on to a film, new fans to a film or to a franchise, they also lost a lot of people as well. And now in the post-Endgame world, where the further we're removed from Endgame, the more and more people are finally waking up to the fact that the story and the movie really aren't as good as they may have remembered it, right? Those incredible moments, I think, clouded a lot of people's judgment of the overall film and of the overall story. But as that starts to become more aware, as people start to wake up to that fact, I think that they're going to start to realize that these big budget movies don't really have as much of a place anymore. Because even if you go to a film like Godzilla vs. Kong, this is a film that I've talked about a lot. I know that a lot of people have been angry with my coverage of it. But even if you go to a film like that, that film, which has made $435 million worldwide, is still a film which is not a guaranteed financial success. Now, again, I understand that that $200 million budget is indeed contested. That you look to the New York Times and they reported at a $155 million budget, but there's other places that have had different numbers. And remember, too, that that 155 was actually actually given pretty early on in around December of 2020, which means that that number likely would have been inflated and would have gone up between that time as the delays were going on, etc. And so that's why I keep it at that higher end. But even if you were to give the benefit of the doubt and say that the film was around broken even and made a little bit of profit, the fact that a massive film like that could only really at most say and garner about $10 to $15 million in net profit, when you compare that to other films and other net gains and net profits that have been made, the fact that you look to A Quiet Place Part 2, which cost $17 million and is already plus 22.8 in net gain, again, that's just net profit right there at this point. I mean, I think that's saying a lot of things. Just one last thing before we go into anything else. As I said, I was able to find a couple of the budgets that had not been there before. As you can see, they do have a line through them, and the reason why is because it came from a NewsGuard certified source, but it was the only place that was actually covering that information. And so I still have my doubts about it, but that is for Those Who Wish Me Dead, which costs around $20 million apparently, which means that that movie is actually, at this point, $20 million in the red, because it's only made $15 million worldwide. And as I've already explained before about how much companies actually get back. And then even though Wrath of Man has made $66 million, that film actually cost, according to that site, $40 million, which means that this movie is already still also negative $20 million, so not a financial success, but it's also a movie that seems to be continuing to push on and soldier on through, so we'll see how it ends by the end of its run, and also if it has a successful Blu-ray or 4K release party as well, and that goes for any of these franchises, any of these movies, including films like Godzilla vs. Kong, which might have a lot of people buying the 4K steelbooks, buying the regular 4K sets, and all these other things, which could easily make up for the money that it didn't necessarily make up in the direct box office. But with all of that being said, I know I got the Hounds of Asgard with me this morning because, yeah, it's about 7 a.m. in the morning over here because I have a new summer schedule where I'm trying to get up a little bit earlier so that I can get some videos recorded because I've fallen behind on so many reviews and so many things. But what are your thoughts about all of this? Let me know in the comment section below. If you like this video, smash that like button, light up that fire button. If you're watching it on Odyssey, River demands that you do so with all of her excitement. You're all amazing and beautiful people. I hope you all have a wonderful day. I hope to see you all for the new morning show over on Odyssey. Good Morning Asgard, 8:45 a.m., exclusive to Odyssey. Again, check out the website for links and more information. Have a wonderful day, everybody. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge shout out to all of my Patreon and Subscribe Star members for the month of May. Ali C83, Andrew Hoyle, Biffer the Hobbit, Brian P, Dion, Divex, Enrique Evangelista, Father Christopher Miller, hail to you, Father. Father Damian Cook, Garrett Searles, Inflamed Wood, It's a Trap Productions, Jason Clark, Jacob Juice, Jeffrey Toone, Jonathan Carney, Laura the Modern Major General's Story, Mad Mitch Dunaway, Mike Jackson, Mr. Peabody and his evil twin with the beautiful hair, On to June, Orange Chat Reviews, Out of Step with Reality, Priscilla Hall, Riff Magos, Rosetta Odin, Steve Glasker, Miss Martin Muses, Theodore Bendon, Tina Bojan, and Tina B. Thank you all very much for being my Patreon members this month. I really always appreciate you. And to my Subscribe Star members, Fast Reaction, Nosferatu Gatsu, Stand For, John B., Perpetual Punster, Mr. Roy, Glinzer, J. Alex McCarthy Jr., Dean Heiss, the new number 2, J-Rod, the Beer Guru, Nevadanji Adams, and ZK Man. Thank you very much for supporting me on Subscribe Star. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every video and live stream, please consider joining on Patreon or Subscribe Star. And if you join at some of the higher levels, you get access to things like giveaways, where every month I do giveaways of 4K titles, steelbooks, and Blu-rays. And again, more information can be found over on Patreon and Subscribe Star. And at the higher levels, you also get access to an exclusive bi-monthly podcast, depending on our schedules. We at least get one long podcast out. We try and get 2 podcasts out as often as we possibly can every single month with John the Flick Pick Flickinger. So again, check out more information. And if you are at the Chosen of Valhalla level, which is the highest level available, you not only get all of those things, you also get in your first month a free t-shirt and also access to the Chosen of Valhalla live stream, where I have my Chosen on a stream talking, asking questions, answering questions questions, talking about movies and anything that they want to talk about. So if all that stuff sounds like fun to you, check out those links below and support the channel in whatever way you can. I do appreciate you, whether you are a member, whether you are a supporter on Patreon, Subscribe Star, or whether you are simply supportive in general, leaving comments and likes. I really greatly appreciate it. You guys are all amazing, beautiful people. Have a wonderful day. And as always, God bless.